Welcome back, class. We're on our third segment of Chapter 11. We're going to talk about mission statements for a few minutes. Mission, it represents a relatively enduring core purpose of an organization that is established by its founding leader or leaders and is its reason for existing. Can be considered a core purpose, a broad purpose, reason for existing. And every organization that at least I've been associated with has always had a mission statement that's usually when people have especially upper level management have a meeting that mission statement will be on the PowerPoint slide, go over it somewhere along the way when they have quarterly meetings with the associates to talk about goals of the organization. The mission statement's always out there, and it is. It's their core purpose of existing, and organizations will, I don't want to say frequently, but they have been known to change those mission statements as the environment in which that industry is functioning in changes. It endures, typically it endures despite changes in technology, economic circumstances, changes to organization environment, and the continuum on a mission statement kind of goes from narrow to broad. And again, even though it tends to endure, those mission statements, sometimes I have to somewhat disagree with the authors. Those mission statements, I've seen them tweaked along the way. I've been in an organization too that the mission statement completely changed. And again, while they say it endures despite, I've seen those mission statements again change from time to time. If you're talking about kind of the narrow mission statement, it's talking about product, it's talking about profit. The broad kind of mission statement, where it may evolve into kind of is the vision. On a broad side, it's innovation, it's excellence, it's socially based, it's core purpose, and a lot of individuals will, or a lot of organizations will combine kind of a narrow and broad themes into their mission statement. I think what they were talking about, and I think they had I think there was like a table in the text, and there was kind of a right hand side and the left hand side. Kind of the right hand side under the narrow said people want to be inspired, more sustainable over time. Again, I don't want to say nebulous, but kind of broad brush type of statements. And then on the left hand side, the narrow mission tends to be tends to be a little more restricted. So, and I may have had that table kind of confused as I walked through it. So, if you're looking at the table, you've got the left-hand side as the narrow and the right-hand side is the broad base. So, again, on the right-hand side, people want to be inspired, more sustainable over time. And again, a little more nebulous, where on the left-hand side where it's narrow, they do talk about, product differentiation, talking about profit margins, talking about financial implications. And that goes to build the effective leader vision. And vision represents a future-oriented articulation on the part of leaders. Goals are tangible and short-term. Vision is less tangible and in the long run frame. And so goals are tangible and short-term. So let's go back to that one. So goals, think about it. You've all had goals, and if you've worked in an organization, I've never seen an organization that didn't have some goals. So, and if I think about the goals that you have in healthcare, they're usually financial goals. They're usually market share goals. They're usually membership goals, and they're pretty specific. Maybe on the medical management side of the house, it's to implement clinical protocols that will bend the healthcare spend trend by a certain percentage, or or again, goals are very tangible, very short term. Most of the goals I've been associated with, where you talk about short term, they're usually annual goals. So those goals that you're track on a quarterly basis, and then you're evaluated against at the annual basis. And if you're talking about vision, it's less tangible in a long time frame, vision oriented toward the future. So when you're talking about goals, you're talking about the here and now and a short term future. If you're talking about vision, you may be talking about, and you hear organizations and health plans especially, they talk about a 3 year vision and strategy. They talk about a 5 year vision and strategy. And each year, as you knock off a year, they're adding a year to them. And you see those visions and strategy documents change over time as the environment changes over time. Elements for an effective leader vision. And again, some of these I'm not sure I just directly agreed with, but they actually make sense. So the first one, it's a long term and bold, and they talk about the BHAG, and I've had and I can't they talk about a big, hairy, audacious goal. I've heard of most of the time I've heard the BHAG in strategy meetings and goal setting meetings. You don't hear the word audacious included in the definition of BHAG, but means the same thing. Oftentimes used to characterize what vision is all about, because it is both long-term and bold. That's what you want. You want a vision statement that's long-term and bold. It's going to build the future of the company. And you'll have a CEO stand up there and say, here's our vision, and here's our 1 year plan, our 3 year plan, our 5 year plan. And we're going to knock it out of the ballpark. And he wants to move forward with the bold vision. And when you're talking about an effective leader vision, it's got to be change oriented. There's always change involved in a new vision. If change wasn't involved, I'm not sure there'd be a rationale for a new vision. Does not involve relatively incremental tweaks to the status quo, highly change oriented, radical in nature, important environmental changes, and environmental changes, and not only environmental changes, but how are you going to impact the threats that you see coming down the pike? I've been in so many meetings where new visions are rolled out, and you're sitting there thinking about them, and it's like, man, what are they? What have they had to drink before they come in this meeting? Because the vision is so outlandish. They're trying to be so bold about it that it actually goes into that kind of that no man's land where you think, well, there's no way in the world we're ever going to make that. It reflects high individuals, it reflects high ideals and values, provides meaning and energize. All about high ideals and values, energizes and brings in it. In a new vision, at least in the short run, it will bring a team together. It's going to bring a team together thinking about change is going to happen, and they like the bold ideas. And I think it's just they're tired of the status quo. The status quo is just not getting the job done. So to energize an organization, or to energize, maybe just energize your team, you come out with a new vision for your team. And it's possible to attain within the latitude of acceptance. There's a fine line between vision and insanity, and I like the concept where the authors roll that out. And sometimes there is a fine line between vision and insanity. You don't want it to get too far afield. You don't want it to be so bold. Again, they talk about it's possible to attain within a latitude of acceptance. So there's some wiggle room on on these bold statements, these bold vision, some wiggle room on whether you're going to make it or not, but at least keep it some time of a sensible attitude. Don't go too far. If it gets ridiculous, then people think it's not worth considering. And then you want it shared widely, but pieced out individually. And this is where they talk about shared is considered a two-way street. Remember, two to tango, two-way street. Uh, it has to be communicated by the leaders to the followers. That's one. And then the followers have to take the vision to heart and share it with others. So you as a leader and you have to communicate this new vision. You have to be explicit when you communicate it so that everybody understands it. You want them to buy into it. And once they buy into it, you want them to, I guess you could say, disperse or diffuse your new vision either to other team members or to other functional areas within an organization. Followers co-create and have a voice in shaping the vision. And that's extremely important. If you've got a team, you want to, at least in the development stage of that vision, or the development stage of that new strategy, you want to bring some of your followers in. You want to get some buy-in, because if you get buy-in on some of your followers, then they start preaching it and they start trying to sell it to other individuals on the team. You want to make sure that everybody on your team understands how the vision relates to their work and their operations. Doesn't do any good to develop a vision, a new strategy, roll it out. And if you can't communicate, if you are a leader, you can't articulate that to your followers with respect to how it's going to impact their workload or how it's going to impact the organizational aspect, especially regarding operations, then it's going to be an extremely difficult process, or it's going to significantly reduce the probability of you getting your team to buy into that vision. Leaders need to communicate enthusiastically with passion and energy, serve as a role model for the new vision, and that's going to help you draw and build the respect of your team, and I don't want to say coerce, and to help incentivize them into grabbing that new vision and run with it. And then they jump in for a few minutes and they talk about how are leaders' values connected to inspiration and vision. Values are relevant to decisions that are made, and that's across a multitude of your very successful firms, entities, organizations. Is the values of the leaders are really intertwined and tied to not only the decisions that they make, but the visions that they build and develop and roll out. And when you're talking about this, and I'm going to say CEOs, and I think this is where they get into the survey. And so they talk about an academic survey, and it was a global survey. If you read the text, or if you remember reading the text, and it's rolled out across companies across the globe. And first they survey the CEOs of companies, and they talk about CEOs kind of fall into two categories: stakeholder-based values and economic concerns and economic values. So they gather information on the CEOs and they break them out, and the CEOs fall into one category or the other. And the subordinates, they talk about, they view the CEOs as inspirational and visionary leadership, or again, as we talked about in some of the earlier chapters, as autocratic leadership. And then on the survey, what they did is they asked the questions: what are your values when you make decisions? How are your followers likely to view you? And what are the outcomes of your organizations likely to be? And these are questions they're asking these CEOs. And what they are wanting to determine is what combinations of these CEO aspects are going to drive that extra effort and commitment and going to drive the firm's performance. And the results, it goes back to actually to the control and the power discussions we've had in multiple chapters. How are the CEOs, at what point do they do they relinquish power? At what point do they, switch from kind of the power base to the hard power into that soft power? And what they learned from the research was stakeholder values engender perceptions of better leadership. And when you're talking about stakeholders, and I think before we get too far into this, a lot of organizations, it depends on when you're talking about stakeholders. Is it, are your followers your stakeholders? Are your clients your stakeholders? Are your customers your stakeholders? If you're publicly traded, if you're an equity-based company, you're publicly traded, it's the stockholders that are your stakeholders. And they're the ones that you have to have you have to do the quarterly earnings report, and you have to convince individuals that you have the perception as an excellent leader, and entice them into purchasing stock in your company. So leadership is largely in the eye of the beholder. And it goes back to context and situation, kind of drives the involvement of the stakeholders. Stakeholders' values are associated with inspiring core purpose and an integration orientation to responsibility. Remember, we talked about an integrator, 2 chapters ago? So again, this chapter 11, is tying a lot of concepts that we've had in earlier chapters, trying to bring them together in a way that makes sense. And I think the authors in the text thought that the research that was done across, it was a global survey, helped them to move or to integrate some of the concepts in some of the earlier chapters into trying to tie things together in chapter 11. I'm not sure that it really accomplished the goal that they were looking for, but it may have gotten them part of the way down the line. Stakeholder values and inspirational visionary leadership are likely to result in good outcomes. That's again, it goes back to common sense. That's if you've got stakeholder values and your inspirational and visionary leadership, it's likely, because you've gotten buy-in from your stakeholders, it's likely to result in better outcomes, especially in the future. Stakeholder values and inspiring visionary leadership are global. And so at least the researchers found this to be a function of not just markets in the United States, but in a global economy, that what actually works to a certain extent in the United States works in some of the other global economies also. And then lastly, the economic values are important, but should not be predominant. I'm not sure that this one I necessarily agree with, because if you're a equity-based company, your shareholders are going to be concerned about economic values. So to me, I'm not sure that it's not that bad, and it's not that big a deal if the economic values do kind of lead toward a predominant aspect of your leadership capabilities or your leadership strategy. Again, it goes back to again, I don't want to seem like I'm beating a dead horse, but effective leadership, it's leaders, followers, and context. What is the context, or what is the industry, or what is the market that your firm functions in? And in some markets, economic values are going to be more important than in other markets. I think that's at least that's my take on it. And I'm not sure that I necessarily agree. Again, not necessarily agree with the authors in the text, but I think they bring out some important points throughout chapter 11, and I think a lot of points are tying the concepts that we learned in some of the other chapters, trying to bring them forward. Because if you've read the other chapters and you read chapter 11, you're going to start recognizing some of those concepts that we discussed and went over in some of the earlier chapters. that's going to wind us up for chapter 11. And the next time we get together, we'll be talking about chapter 12. Talk to everybody soon.